After 10 years of humiliation, their incredible daughter stands up in court to expose the truth. Sarah Kline stood at the entrance of the courthouse, her breath quickening. The weight of a decade's worth of shame bore down on her, throbbing like an unhealed wound. Today was the day she would confront everything: the whispers at the grocery store, the furtive glances at community events, the thick tension at family gatherings. Her heart raced, a prisoner in her own chest, as she glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see the familiar shadow of her father's ailing spirit looming behind her. Would he be proud of her today, or would she merely drag him deeper into the mire of their shared humiliation? With the trial looming, unease wound its way through her thoughts. The whispers were louder now, fueled by her reckless pursuit of justice. Every time she uncovered a new piece of evidence, a new connection to the cover-up that had robbed her father of his dignity, she felt her resolve growing stronger. But then doubt crept in, curling around her like a snake. What if she exposed the wrong person? What if the businessman's reputation in all its illustrious sheen was untouchable, and her father's name was lost again in the backlash? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The trial dates were set like pebbles marking the path to an uncertain future, each one more daunting than the last. Sarah opened her law books, their pages now littered with hastily scribbled notes and underlined phrases that signified her battle against the injustice that had plagued her family. But with each word she read, she felt the gnawing dread grow louder. The thought of stepping into that courtroom caused her stomach to twist. Could she pull the trigger on this truth, knowing it might explode shrapnel across her family, further alienating them from the community? The stakes felt impossibly high, her father's isolated gaze haunting her as if he bore witness to her turmoil. Her mind raced, tracing over the compelling evidence that entwined her father's case with the influential businessman whose name surfaced in the documents. The evidence wove a tale of betrayal and greed that shook the foundations of everything she believed. But would pursuing this path shatter the delicate remnants of a relationship with her father? Would their bond withstand the turbulence of betrayal that truth often demanded? In the grip of her internal conflict, memories flooded her consciousness, punctuating her resolve with a heavy nostalgia. The laughter of family dinners echoed in her mind, much like the clinking of glasses. That familiar symphony now felt like an elegy for lost joy. How had they come to this? Could she tug her father free from the lie that had wrapped around him like an iron shroud, or would laying bare her findings obliterate them both? The court's doors loomed before her, glass and steel reflecting a harsh reality. Standing there, Sarah felt her heart hammer against her ribs, the weight of her decision pressing down. One last deep breath, she thought, but her lungs felt it too, a shallow inhale, her body betraying her nerves. As the gavel sounded and silence gripped the room, her heart raced in a chaotic rhythm, an orchestra of fear and determination playing in unison. Could she shove aside the dread, peel back the layers of silence, and reveal a truth that might dismantle the very foundation of her father's sentence? The stakes had never been higher. This was her moment, and yet anxiety coiled tight around her chest. Standing there, poised to expose the truth, the echoes of that fateful day 10 years ago loomed large. Would her voice pierce through the silence, or would the fear of repercussions paralyze her once again? The gavel's echo still rang in Sarah's ears as she hesitated, her eyes scanning the room, filled with judgmental gazes. Lawyers and onlookers alike held their breath, awaiting her next move, as if the very essence of justice rested on her shoulders. In that moment, she sensed that her decision would carve a path not just for her family, but for her own identity. The truth would either empower her or leave her vulnerable. Would unearthing this dirty truth mark her as a hero or condemn her as a traitor? Sarah's mind churned through the evidence. She meticulously compiled a damning timeline of deceit and betrayal. But visions of her father's face flickered through her thoughts. Would he see her as the daughter who sought vengeance, or the one who challenged the status quo for the sake of their name? The allure of justice intertwined with suffocating dread. She felt as if she were teetering on the precipice of a vast chasm, unsure if she could take the leap without falling into darkness. Taking a step forward, Sarah squared her shoulders. The attorney opposing her rose, a polished figure exuding the kind of confidence that rattled her resolve. A small voice inside her whispered that appearances could be deceiving, but doubt's grip tightened around her throat. "You can do this," she thought, pushing back against the tide of anxiety flooding her system. Just as her resolve began to solidify, a familiar flicker of uncertainty clouded her thoughts. What if the very ethics she was fighting for became a liability? What if exposing the truth would drive her father deeper into despair? The courtroom felt suddenly smaller, suffocating, the walls closing in around her as she contemplated the repercussions of her actions. It was here that the ground began to shift beneath her, and Sarah realized she needed to own her agency. In that moment of clarity, she envisioned her father's spirit, not as a shadowy figure weighed down by fear, but as a symbol of resilience. His laughter echoed in her mind, invigorating her sense of purpose. She could turn the tide, not just for him, but for herself. The whispers of the crowd faded, leaving only the pulsing beat of her heart reminding her that she had every right to demand accountability. Focusing on the evidence, she took a deep breath, letting determination sweep away her fear. Her voice steadied, a flicker of strength igniting as she began to present her case. 10 years ago, my father was wronged, she declared, each word falling onto the courtroom floor like a hammer striking an anvil. He lost everything because of a lie. Today, I will not allow that injustice to continue. The room was frozen in unexpected silence. Sarah could feel the electricity in the air, a charged moment when the tide of battle turned. She shared the details, the documents, the names, the circumstances surrounding her father's fall from grace. Each piece of evidence she unveiled lit a fire of conviction within her that she didn't know existed. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and intoxicating all at once. But as she spoke, the weight of consequence hovered just above her. Facing that businessman, the very architect of her father's downfall, would demand everything she had. The seconds ticked away, each one stretching into eternity as she awaited their reaction. And then, as she locked eyes with her adversary, an unexpected flicker crossed his face, a mix of anger, fear, and perhaps recognition. The battlefield had shifted, but unbeknownst to her, an entirely different challenge was looming, one that would test her newfound strength even further. "Sarah Kline, you have entered a battle you cannot win," he sneered, making her shiver with the weight of his words. With those words, the courtroom felt as though it was about to explode with tension, and Sarah braced herself. Her journey had just begun, a harrowing climb against forces much larger than her. She knew the coming days would require her to dig down into the depths of her potential. The question was no longer just about exposing the past, but about confronting the very essence of power, manipulation, and her own ability to endure. The time had come to face not just the ramifications of the truth, but the darker corners of her own resolve. She would have to prepare for a confrontation that veered from the well-trodden path, setting the stage for a conflict that raised questions of loyalty and courage she had never considered before. Would she be strong enough to wield the truth she uncovered, or would it become yet another tool for her adversaries to exploit? The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted as Sarah anchored her resolve. Every glare from the opposition was a palpable challenge, and the echo of her adversary's words clung to her like a shroud, casting a shadow over her newest revelation. But in that moment of damning judgment, she could feel the pulse of change within her. She was not just a daughter seeking retribution, she was a catalyst of truth. Taking a breath, she understood the stakes were higher than she had initially perceived. The notion of losing would mean not just defeat. It could bury her family's name deeper in disgrace. Yet the reality of living beneath the weight of that disgrace felt even more stifling. This realization compelled her to wrestle with the understanding that power, however crooked, often sought to intimidate the very truth it attempted to subvert. As she stepped deeper into the role of the plaintiff, the emotional armor she donned began to feel like a source of strength rather than an obligation. "We don't fight alone, do we?" she thought, allowing a small smile to flicker across her lips in refreshing defiance. With each factored detail, she fortified her resolve both in herself and, she hoped, within the courtroom. This wasn't merely about her father's past. It was about establishing her own identity through clarity, a reclamation of dignity her family so desperately needed. The pounding rhythm of her heart synchronized with her thoughts, and she began to strategize her next move. She envisioned the upcoming witnesses, the experts she could call upon. Each would serve as pillars ensuring her case remained unassailable. Her eyes darted towards the gallery, catching a flicker of encouragement from an unexpected face, an old family friend who had weathered the storm with them. Something shifted within her. It wasn't just battle lines being drawn. It was a call for unity. As Sarah honed her focus on her strategy, self-doubt began to dissipate, replaced with an intoxicating mix of urgency and clarity. It was here she began to see that her confrontation with the businessman wasn't simply a contest of disclosure. It would probe the morality embedded in corrupt practices that pervaded their industry. Her father deserved better, but so did she. She made quick notes on the areas where her adversary may appear weak, the emotional triggers she could leverage to drive her point home. She had, what others lacked, an intimate understanding of the emotional foundation underlying the evidence. She wasn't just showcasing facts. She was weaving a narrative that could shake the very core of her opponent's carefully engineered facade. Then, as if reminding her of the sacrifices and risks involved, she found the notes of conversation between her father and the people who had conspired against him. Each line detailed how small their man-made constructs of power truly were when faced with that unwavering commitment to truth. "Let them realize the gravity of their actions," she murmured under her breath, conviction swelling within her. She realized that this was not just a battle for her father's redemption. It was a quest for acknowledgement of their shared pain. The narrative of her family history was being reshaped and reframed with each determined word spoken. But just as she felt the tide could definitively turn in her favor, an uncertainty flickered at the edges of her thoughts. What if the truth brought more harm than good? Was justice an inherently destructive force aimed at the very family she wanted to protect? A sudden snap of the gavel brought her thoughts crashing back to the present, the judge observing her tense posture with keen interest. Time would soon reveal whether she was fighting for liberation or merely unshackling a darker fate. With the world around her swirling in anticipation, Sarah's next words would be pivotal. Would she continue boldly down this path, or would she realize that the truth can often have unforeseen consequences? The silence was deafening as she stood on the precipice of a revelation far beyond mere justice. Are we prepared for the storm that may follow? She questioned herself, ready to confront not just her adversary's fabricated lies, but the very essence of what truth meant for her family, and what power it truly held. With her heart pounding and adrenaline coursing through her veins, Sarah decided it was time to not merely answer the challenge posed by her adversary, but to reframe the questions surrounding justice and integrity. The courtroom awaited the resolution of her fate, hovering in limbo as she prepared for that electrifying confrontation. She locked eyes with the businessman again. A fearsome determination surged through her. The moment had come to face the question that haunted her. Could she withstand the cataclysmic repercussions of unearthing the truth? The courtroom echoed with a heavy silence, stretching the seconds into eternity. Sarah's heart raced as she prepared to deliver the words that could alter her path indefinitely. She steadied herself, aiming to cast aside the swell of trepidation pooling within her. As she rose, she stole a glance at her father's empty chair. His absence wasn't just a physical void. It bore the weight of his unresolved struggles. She felt an urge to channel that pain into the clarity she craved, not just for him, but for herself. This was not merely about naming the corruption that had swirled in their lives. It was about reclaiming her narrative and stepping out from the shadow of victimhood. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling slightly before firming up with purpose. "Today, I stand before you as a daughter seeking justice not only for my father, but for who I choose to be." Each word was meticulously chosen, a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. She felt the glares from the opposing counsel sharpen, their skepticism palpable, but it only fueled her resolve. This was no longer just a legal battle. It felt like a personal resurrection. The memories of whispered accusations, disdainful glances, and the stigma of her father's downfall washed over her. But she poured herself into this moment. It was time to articulate the truth that had simmered beneath the surface. "My father was not the monster they claim him to be," she declared. "He fell victim to the ruthless designs of those who manipulate power for their gain." The courtroom stirred at the fierce allegation. She could sense the shift in energy. As she laid out the facts, strategically weaving in the narratives of betrayal and greed, she felt an electric connection with the witnesses she had prepared. Each of them was a brick in the wall she was constructing, a fortress of truth hardened against the onslaught of falsehoods. She spoke passionately about the emotional impact this had not only on her family, but on countless others victimized by the same individuals. With a deft articulation of her father's brilliance, she painted him not just as a casualty, but as a tragic hero caught in a web spun by powerful adversaries. Sarah began to notice the nuances in the reactions of the gallery. Some were engaged, while others were visibly shocked. The tide, she hoped, was shifting. Yet, even amidst the momentum, an undercurrent of doubt slithered through her mind. Was she prepared to confront the full might of what lay ahead? What would it mean to unearth the truth that could topple sanitized reputations? The whispers of worry echoed louder and louder in her psyche. As she reached the climax of her presentation, she recalled the secret conversations she had encountered, the collusion among powerful players. These documents were damning, exposing the intricate networks that had conspired against her father and, by extension, against her. "Imagine being held accountable for a crime orchestrated without your knowledge," she implored the court. "This is a story of systemic corruption, a fight for integrity against those who twist the rules for their enrichment." As her words hung in the air, a tangible tension crackled through the room. The judge's brow furrowed, the opposing counsel fidgeted, and murmurs from the gallery blended into a dull roar. Finally, with an unexpected resolve, she descended from her emotional high ground to confront her adversary directly. "Do you see now what your quest for power has wrought?" The businessman, once smug and confident, took a hesitant step back. His facade, meticulously crafted, began to crack, and within that small fracture, Sarah found an affirmation of her strength. She was not merely regurgitating facts. She was fundamentally reshaping narratives, peeling back layers of deception. Just as she felt the disappointment of her fears begin to wane, a sudden realization struck her. Her next move wouldn't just expose their duplicity. It could fully unravel everything she had worked towards, destabilizing her world further. As she prepared to pivot into the darker implications of her discoveries, the gavel echoed again. What if I stepped too far? She pondered. Would the truth she sought to unveil be a double-edged sword? More than just consequences loomed. There was a chance it could swallow her whole. The silence returned, electrifying, as she pressed forward, heart pounding. Could she truly harness the monster within this confrontation, or would it plunge her deeper into chaos? The moment had come to verbalize the ultimatum. How far will you go to protect the truth? And as the words hung in the air, she sensed that whatever lay ahead would demand a sacrifice she hadn't fully prepared for. forcing her to confront not only her enemies, but the very foundation of her identity. In the aftermath of her passionate declaration, the courtroom hung in taut anticipation, each individual processing the weight of Sarah's words differently. The judge's gaze shifted to her, a contemplative frown etched across his face. Moments like this demanded justice to be blind, yet the truth could be blinding. Could he see her strength, or would he dismiss her as merely a distraught daughter lost in the throes of emotion? Her heart beat wildly, but she knew that vulnerability could be her power if harnessed correctly. The hesitation she felt morphed into clarity. This courtroom was no longer just a stage, but a battleground, and she was ready to wield her weapon, her truth. "Your Honor," she continued, modifying her tone to sound both resolute and pleading, "we cannot let power dictate our narratives. The result of that is a relentless cycle of silence and complicity." With each phrase, she felt as if she were pulling herself closer to her destiny, revealing an essence that she had hidden even from herself. The opposing counsel, now visibly uneasy, began to conspire quietly with his team, their furtive whispers sending prickles down her spine. Was her boldness rattling their confidence? Did they sense her growing resolve? She shifted slightly, welcoming the ember of her courage to ignite bolder flames. People in the gallery leaned forward, faces rapt with interest. The moment was more profound than simply legal jargon. It transcended chrome and arguments. This was about correcting the injustices that had marred her family's legacy. And in that realization, she felt a sliver of hope pierce through her fears. With renewed vigor, Sarah turned her attention back to the documents she had meticulously assembled, holding a key piece of evidence that had eluded their adversaries. Her hand trembled, not with fear, but anticipation. "I present Exhibit A," she announced, thrusting the papers aloft as if unveiling a trophy. They were emails, meticulously detailing the collusion among the powerful. Instantly, the atmosphere in the room shifted, the tension thickening like fog. A collective gasp resonated through the gallery. Each revelation was another nail in the coffin for the lie her father had been trapped in. "Here is proof of orchestrated deception," she pressed, each word punctuated with the weight of her conviction. "From executives who manipulated accounts to those who stood by, enabling this rampant corruption." She methodically read snippets of damning evidence that traced the web back to the very figures she knew had conspired against them. With every revelation, her confidence burgeoned. The enemy's grip felt less formidable. Yet, as the courtroom trembled with the implications of her shares, another realization washed over her. This path held shadows, obscured intentions, and darker truths that might emerge. What more might she uncover? What hidden dimensions of herself had yet to be revealed? The opposing counsel aimed a pointed finger at her, but can you truly handle the chaos that follows? How many lives will you upend in your quest for vindication? His tone was mocking, but veiled within lay an unsettling challenge that sparked a flicker of doubt. Could she bear the weight of her revelations? Was she ready to dismantle not only the lying structure of those elite players, but the darker aspects of herself that were tied to this legacy? Every act of courage invites conflict, she mused quietly, contesting both the external accusations and her internal fears alike. The truth's allure was intoxicating, yet she felt the wicked questions wrapping around her heart with a menacing grip. Taking a deep breath, she steadied her hands, resolute. If levying the truth means exposing more than just their crimes, if it means confronting the tangled roots of who I am, then I embrace that, she declared. As she prepared once again to lay bare the undercurrents of corruption, she felt the weight of realization settle on her shoulders. The task ahead would require more than professional skill. It demanded emotional resilience she had yet to fully understand. Can I truly safeguard not just my father's name, but reclaim my own identity in the process? The gavel poised in uncertainty, she prepared her final rebuttal. The blood surged through her veins, a resounding chorus of determination amidst swirling chaos. What lay beyond this moment was a question with staggering answers. And the courtroom might soon witness a metamorphosis, a new Sarah emerging from the ashes of her past, as the looming darkness of uncertainty coiled around her ambitions. She sensed the crossroads fast approaching, where revelation could very well lead her to a darker truth about herself than she had dared to confront. Could she emerge from this court's wrath, not just victorious, but transformed? The moment, fraught with possibility, was upon her. The room was pulsating with tension as Sarah felt the weight of every gaze, the scrutiny mingling with her determination. She had become not just an advocate for her father, but a voice for all those silenced by power. The flicker of self-doubt momentarily threatened to extinguish her fire, but just as quickly, she rekindled that fervor. Her words had sparked a shift, a chink in the armor of the oppressors, a glimmer of opportunity. "Listen closely," she said, her voice steady now, merging urgency with authority. "What I reveal today extends beyond this case. It calls for a reckoning, a demand for integrity. For too long, these players thought they could act without scrutiny, but I stand before you as proof that the foundation they built on deception is crumbling." The opposing counsel's eyes narrowed, their confidence wavering under the weight of her conviction. Sarah relished in that moment, feeling a potent mix of liberation and responsibility surge through her veins. The journey leading up to this point had been fraught with uncertainty, an ongoing battle against the shackles of her past. Each step she took toward the truth felt like an excavation, peeling back layers she had long buried beneath familial loyalty and societal expectation. As she read the emails aloud, pieces of her voice echoed in her memory, whispers from childhood that had warned her against airing dirty laundry. But this was different. This was a confrontation, a reclamation. Behind each dagger of truth she revealed was a statement about her own identity and her place within a narrative that had long been scripted by others. Each effusive word shone a light that illuminated her potential, revealing competencies she had never recognized. With every detailed allegation, Sarah ventured further into the realms of her own psyche, revisiting moments of insecurity, feeling unworthy, questioning if she was bright enough, brave enough. Those shadowy memories threatened to smother her newfound courage. Yet, in the face of mounting pressure, she centered herself. What they fear the most is that a single truth can topple a fortress of lies, she thought, feeling the gravity of her role sink deeper into her core. Each affirmation she voiced about her father's innocence was as much a declaration of her own autonomy, a claim to not stand in the shadows any longer. Her resolve hardened when she noticed the gallery's expressions, a patchwork of disbelief, anger, and empathy. She couldn't turn back now. The courage she had summoned from within was bolstered by the shared energy in the room. She moved, not just within the confines of the courtroom, but into a broader universe of shared human experiences, a plea for justice echoing through the fabric of her very being. Then, she locked eyes with the opposing counsel. His smirk faltered slightly, revealing the underlying crack within his previous confidence. In that moment of vulnerability, Sarah seized the opportunity. "The chaos you speak of is the consequence of your actions, not mine. I am not here to create destruction. I am here to rebuild, to reclaim my name, my father's legacy, and to rewrite the narrative that was force-fed to me. Today, those truths will not only reveal their wrongs, but illuminate my rebirth." Just as her declaration hung in the air, she noticed a flicker of recognition in the judge's eyes. Had he seen something more than a woman defending a father? Was he witnessing the birth of a formidable advocate, someone who could shift the balance of justice and unearth layers of buried truths? Yet, an undercurrent of anxiety lingered. The confidence that had surged within her moments ago began to mingle with doubt about the implications of her quest. What if the hidden truth she unearthed not only harmed others, but backfired on her sense of self? Would she remain whole, or would the upheaval disassemble everything she thought she knew about loyalty and identity? Sarah took a steadying breath. The trial was more than just a fight against corruption. It was a battleground of her own making. Am I prepared to navigate the fallout? She questioned silently as she steeled herself for the impending revelations that lay ahead. As the judge's gavel hovered in the air, it felt like the calm before storm. A collision of fateful decisions loomed, and she was acutely aware that her metamorphosis was just beginning. What awaited her in the depths of this transformative abyss, and how much of herself was she willing to uncover? With the courtroom in a tense silence, Sarah braced herself for what the universe would unfold, knowing it could shift the very course of her life forever. The gavel echoed like a judgment clamoring within Sarah, heralding the beginning of a profound moment. The weight of her thoughts swung back to the challenge she faced. This was no longer solely about her father. It spiraled deeper, piercing the fabric of her identity, demanding she reconcile a lifetime of being unseen. Each accusation she flung like arrows at the wall of deceit tested not just the perpetrator, but the very essence of who she had always been. She inhaled deeply, feeling the sharpness of her convictions, each heartbeat amplifying the urgency of her cause. The opposing counsel began to rise, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she mentally braced herself, recognizing a pivot point in her transformation. This was where her past met her future, a crucible, refining her with each statement made in the name of truth. Would she emerge whole or fragmented by the sheer weight of what lay ahead? As the rebuttal unfolded, she sensed the consciousness of the room shift toward her, a pulse of energy reverberating through the air as the opposing counsel attempted to re-establish his ground. "This is a simple case of familial loyalty being exploited," he asserted, dismissing her standing as a frivolous outburst. That characterization stung. It cut deep, another testimony to the potency of perception and the struggle she had long faced. Each word from him felt like a blow, yet instead of waiting to retaliate, Sarah absorbed it, mining the emotional grit it provided. What had once been a disheartening narrative painted by others now highlighted the courage she could wield. Her heart raced with determination, propelling her forward as she prepared her next move. Just then, amidst the chaos, something within her emerged, a silent rebellion against the doubts that had occasionally haunted her. Her thoughts bridged her past and present, sparking a latent competency she had yet to acknowledge. Her fear dragged behind her, morphing into a relentless drive. "I will not be belittled any longer," she affirmed within. With each spark of resolve, she pictured herself as more than just a daughter. She was an advocate stepping into her power. The judge's eyes flickered back to her, urging her to speak. Sarah exhaled, and the words poured forth, crisply articulated and unwavering. "They wish to portray my journey as one of blind loyalty, but I'm not defending an image. I'm advocating for truth in the shadow of betrayal." Her voice rang with clarity, each syllable cutting the tension taut. She could see reflections of her struggle in the faces around her, those awakening to their own narratives, feeling reprieved by her declaration. She saw them, remembered their stories, and could not back down now. As she argued her case, she began weaving her own experience into her testimony, revealing the moments that had galvanized her, the unrelenting inner voice that had urged her forward even when doubt cloaked her with heaviness. This isn't about a single person's infraction. It's about a network of denial and the cost of silence, she contended, her conviction solidifying. She had tapped into something greater than herself, an awareness of shared experiences thicker than blood, but doubts still stirred within her, casting shadows. Could she carry the weight of those expectations? The burden of unleashing raw truths was not merely external. It was an internal unraveling that she grappled with. Could she withstand the fallout of what she planned to expose? As she advanced through her claims, something unexpected happened. A flicker of recognition danced in her mind. The doubt that tried to tether her unraveling identity began to dissolve under the burgeoning clarity of purpose. Facing her past, she locked eyes with the judge again, and in that momentary exchange, she noticed his understanding not as a mere arbiter of the law, but as a witness to her transformation. The stakes transcended the enigmatic shadows her family once cast. This was a reckoning resonating deep within her soul. With her heart racing, she confronted the duality of her existence. The daughter, caught in a web of familial duty, and the emerging woman determined to reclaim her narrative. Yet even as Sarah filled the courtroom with a voice of authenticity, a gnawing apprehension pulsed through her veins. She steeled against it, knowing that true growth often lurked behind the veil of discomfort. What unfurling truths lay on the horizon, and how would they challenge the very essence of who she thought she was? The air felt electrified as she prepared for the next wave of her confrontation, knowing that each revelation would either cement her identity or shatter the fragments of a carefully constructed facade. The moment had come to face what awaited her. Would she stand firm against the turbulence of her past, or would she yield to the storm? The courtroom pulsed with an intensity that mirrored Sarah's internal chaos. As she faced the opposing counsel, time felt suspended, her heartbeat merging with the tension of the moment. Every person present became a participant in her battle, not just for this case, but for her rediscovery. The air hummed with an electrifying blend of anxiety and hope. "Miss Carter," the judge's voice pierced through the thick atmosphere. "Please continue." The words served as a tether, drawing her back to the present. She stood taller, gathering every shard of self-belief she had clawed back from the depths of doubt. "I stand here not out of rage, but out of necessity, a necessity for truth," she declared, her voice rising above the din. The room fell into an anticipatory silence, her words shocking the very foundations of the misconception laid down by her adversaries. With each argument she articulated, she saw them not just as legal claims, but as pieces of her fragmented identity. We often think of loyalty as a virtue, something sacred. But what happens when loyalty cloaks wrongdoing? Her own question echoed in her mind, a challenge not only to her father's choices, but also to her own blind acceptance of her past. She was learning to dismantle more than just the lies in front of her. She was unearthing the truth buried beneath years of silence. As she recalled moments of familial strife, the glances of shame, the hushed conversations, each memory sparked a simmering resolve. She began to weave these recollections into her narrative, digging deeper into the emotional undercurrents that had once defined her relationships. "My father's actions have made me question not just his integrity, but my own choices in navigating our relationship," she continued, steadying her breath to maintain the rhythm of her resurgent narrative. The opposing counsel attempted to interrupt, but she held her ground, refusing to be sidelined again. "By protecting his image, I risked losing my own. This is no longer about him protecting himself at my expense. This is about me reclaiming what has always been mine, my voice." Those words felt explosive, rippling outward as if they had ignited something not just in her, but in the others seated in the gallery. Realization began dawning. The weight of fear was one she had been conditioned to carry, but now she felt lighter, buoyed by intentions that were resolute and pure. Behind her convictions lay an awakening ambition, albeit fraught with a recklessness that emerged when abandoning the facade she had long inhabited. Yet, a creeping doubt still nipped at her ankles, like an insidious serpent lying in wait. What if revealing these truths upended the few remaining connections she had to her family? Was she prepared to face their wrath? The prospect shimmered in her thoughts, a reminder that the very act of standing up could also mean standing alone. As her gaze fell upon the faces in the courtroom, one filled with skepticism, another with empathy, she felt a potent sense of purpose solidify within her. She was forging connections that transcended bloodlines, rallying her newfound identity as an advocate and truth-teller. Each glance reflected back evidence of her resilience. She could leverage this to both inspire others and shield herself from the potential fallout. The judge cleared his throat, interrupting her reflections. "Miss Carter, please summarize your position." With momentous clarity, Sarah met the judge's gaze, understanding that every soul present hung on her words. I reclaim my narrative today for myself and for those silenced. It is time we shattered the subservient chains of unquestioned loyalty and crafted a reality where honesty reigns, irrespective of familial ties. The weight of her declaration hung in the air, palpable and raw. Would her courage galvanize those around her, or isolate her further? As she finished, the courtroom remained split between hushed admiration and palpable tension. Every heart fluttered with expectation. Sarah could feel it in the atmosphere thick with unresolved histories. Outside these walls, her next challenge awaited: how to navigate the storm of backlash that was all but certain. But deep inside, an undeniable fire burned stronger than before, made vibrant by the truths she was finally ready to face. The verdict might rest with the judge, but within her, the realization settled. This was merely her first act. What lay ahead was a journey of self-discovery that would lead her to confront the hardest truths, yet the reactions of her family, the ramifications of her revelations, and her own unsteady footing in a landscape only just beginning to reveal itself. What further truths would she unearth, and could she withstand the inevitable tremors of an unrecognizable reality? The answer lay just ahead, shrouded in both promise and peril. As Sarah stepped out of the courtroom, the bright sunlight felt jarring after the muted atmosphere of the proceedings. The moment she stepped into the bustling streets, the gravity of her actions settled in like an unwelcome weight. Her heart raced not only from adrenaline, but from the reality of what lay ahead, confronting her family. She had chosen to break her silence, but the repercussions would be immediate and intensely personal. Thoughts whirled in her mind as she navigated the chaotic sidewalks. What would her mother's response be? The matriarch had always been the bedrock of the family dynamics, a shield between Sarah and her father's turbulent ways. Would her mother's loyalty to her husband outweigh her concern for her daughter? The prospect cut deeper than any criticism from her opponents in court. Each step resonated with the echoes of her own declaration in the courtroom. She felt empowered yet anxious, on the verge of a new beginning, even as the threads of her old life threatened to unravel. The glow of her recent courage was dimmed by the uncertainty of familial fracture. Arriving at her apartment, she hesitated at the door. Memories of countless evenings spent within these walls washed over her night after night of quiet submissions to her family's expectations. But the woman stepping inside was not the same as the one who had left this morning. She was a woman transformed, ready to challenge the embedded narratives of her life. Once inside, the scent of faint lavender from a diffuser brought back simpler times, but she knew she was no longer that girl who would turn a blind eye. Filtering through her emotions, Sarah took a moment to breathe. It was essential to position herself not just as a challenger of lies, but as an advocate for truth, even if it meant standing alone. With determination, she pulled out her phone and dialed her mother. As the familiar ringing tone echoed in her ear, her mind raced with everything she could say. The call connected, and her mother's voice greeted her with a mix of warmth and concern. "Sarah, are you okay?" Here it was the moment she had prepared for, but could never truly anticipate. "Mom, I need to talk. It's important." She sensed her mother's distress, but pressed on. She had fought too hard for her voice to be silenced now. "Is this about the trial?" Her mother probed, concern prickling her voice. "Yes, but it's deeper than that. I'm ready to discuss, Dad. The lies, everything." Each word felt monumental, like teeth pulled free from decades of silence, but a heavy silence fell on the line. Sarah could imagine her mother's reaction, perhaps shock, or perhaps denial, an impulsive need to defend her husband. "Sarah, can we not do this now? We can talk about this later." "No, Mom. We need to confront this together. I am tired of carrying the burden of loyalty to a man whose actions shattered our trust. It's about time we acknowledged the truth." The line crackled with emotional tension, and an internal battle raged in Sarah's mother, barely contained. "You don't understand how hard this is for all of us." But Sarah had traversed the rocky terrain of her own discomfort and emerged on the other side. "I'm starting to understand. It's vital that I reclaim my story, even if it shakes the foundation of our family." Another pause. The gravity of her declaration hung like an untenable promise in the air. "What are you saying?" Would her mother choose to meet her strength with resistance, or would this force her into the light? The anticipated backlash was evident, and with it, a sense of freedom arose, a freedom that stemmed from finally stepping into her own truth, regardless of the consequences. As the conversation unfolded, Sarah felt elements of her past resurfacing, a collage of emotions and shared histories, muddled with pain, yet colored by hope. This was her personal revolution, but she could not shy away from confronting her father. Crackling tension twisted within her, the challenge of balancing familial relationships while dismantling the expectations that had long suffocated her spirit. And, as she articulated her truths, she realized that this was merely the opening chapter of her story. The real test lay ahead. Would her family rally around her, or would they retreat into the protective silence that had fostered the decades of manipulation? With bated breath, she sensed her journey into the depths of familial complexity had only just begun. How much strength lay hidden within her, and would that strength be enough to withstand the drastic changes to come? The answers loomed just beyond the next conversation, ready to challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and her past. In the weeks following the trial, Sarah Kline felt an unexpected surge of liberation. She had laid bare a web of deceit, unearthing truths that had lain dormant for years. The once unshakable loyalty she held for her father had transformed into a fierce commitment to truth, not just for his sake, but for her own identity. Each day brought its own challenges, and while the recognition of her personal strength was exhilarating, she was now acutely aware of the repercussions of her actions. That on a chilly afternoon, wrapped in the warmth of sunlight streaming through her apartment window, Sarah meticulously reviewed her father's case, weaving together the narratives that would serve as a foundation for rebuilding their fractured bond. It became clear to her that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The truth could expose their family's past as an unrelenting saga of grief and dishonesty. Yet it could also provide an opportunity to reclaim agency, not just for her father, but for herself. Determined to break free from the long-standing cycle of silence, she could no longer wait. She decided it was time to reach out to her father. Standing at a fork in the road, she felt the weight of her decision, either to maintain the rift or to confront the discomfort that lay between them. Perhaps this time, they could stand together, united by the fight for recognition and reconciliation. With apprehension mixed with newfound conviction, Sarah made the call. Each ring felt heavy, echoing her uncertainty. When her father's voice finally pierced through the static, it was a sound she had known well, yet now it stood as a reminder of all that had transpired. "Dad, it's Sarah," she said, her heart racing. "Sarah?" he replied, a flicker of concern threading through his tone. "Is everything all right?" "Not exactly. I want to talk about things, the trial, and the truth. I think it's time we faced it together." Silence loomed on the other end, a comforting blanket that had been stripped away. "You understand I'm not ready to go back to all of this. It's painful. I know, and I respect that, but we can't shy away from what happened any longer. We have to face this. I don't want you to carry the burden alone, and I refuse to hide from it anymore," she urged, her voice steady but vulnerable. She could sense the internal tumult on the other side of the line, a reflection of their shared history. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" he finally asked, his voice cracking with a mixture of disbelief and sadness. "I want us to process this together, to redefine what it means to be a family in the wake of everything. I want to be honest with you, and I want you to be honest with me. Can we do that?" After a long pause, a quiet resolve settled over him. "All right, let us meet." Later that week, they sat across from each other in a simple cafe, the air thick with unspoken words. Sarah initiated the dialogue, recounting the horror of the last decade, the frustration, the shame, and the pain of their lives woven into that twisted tapestry of lies. As she spoke, she experienced a catharsis, unveiling layers of hurt and anger she had held for so long. Each word spilled out with newfound strength, articulated with the conviction that her voice mattered. In the tension-laden silence that followed, her father finally began to share his own narrative, his fears, regrets, and overwhelming sorrow. Together, they unraveled the threads of resentment that had long tethered them to the past. In that cafe, surrounded by the bustle of everyday life, they forged a connection defined by authenticity rather than shame. For once, they were weaving strands of their lives into a new narrative. Weeks turned into months, and as they continued their journey towards reconciliation, Sarah embraced her evolving identity. She celebrated the small victories, such as having her work recognized in the legal community for her role in exposing corruption. Invitations to speak at panels emerged, and she found herself advocating for victims trapped in the cycle of silence, illuminating her newfound competence. Professionally, Sarah flourished. She landed a position as a legal consultant specializing in cases involving victim advocacy, where her experience spurred change. Each day was an opportunity to validate others' stories, healing those who had been marginalized and silenced just as she once felt. In a poignant moment that encapsulated her journey, Sarah stood at the podium at a conference, addressing a room full of engaged attendees. "I stand before you not just as a daughter seeking truth, but as an advocate for those who believe their voices do not matter." Her words resonated with authority, and she felt recognized for her hard-earned growth. With her father by her side, she often reflected on their conversation at the cafe. They had fought that battle together, transcending the confines of their past. The shadows of humiliation had dissipated, revealing the strength forged through authenticity and transparency. As she finally stepped in her new life, Sarah appreciated the deep satisfaction of her journey. She had revealed the truth, both in the courtroom and within the confines of her own heart, affirming her independence from the shackles of her family's legacy. Her transformation signified more than mere professional accomplishment. It illuminated a broader path toward emotional liberation. The story she wrote was no longer defined by shame, but by resilience, a celebration of personal achievement and empowerment. And so, for every person watching this transformation unfold, remember, you need to subscribe now, as this is the moment to show your support for stories that redefine narratives of overcoming. Leave a like now to ensure these powerful tales reach those who need them most. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Sarah's journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who deserve to see how truth and resilience can redefine lives. Don't wait even one more second to connect. Your part in this story matters.